The first ride. The morning sun filtered through the large oak tree in front of the Johnsons' new house, casting soft, dappled light onto the lawn. Boxes still lay scattered around the house, remnants of yesterday's move-in frenzy, but Lisa Johnson didn't care about the unpacked chaos. She had bigger things on her mind. Today was her first day at her new school. Lisa, an energetic 8-year-old with deep brown eyes that sparkled with curiosity, wore a brand-new blue backpack that nearly covered her entire back. She was bouncing with excitement and a little nervousness as her mother, Nina, crouched down to straighten her collar. "Are you ready for this, sweetheart?" Nina asked with a warm smile, trying to hide her own anxiety behind encouraging words. She felt a little nervous herself. Moving to this predominantly white neighborhood had been a big decision for their family. The Johnsons hoped for better opportunities and a safer environment, but Nina couldn't ignore the subtle glances from the neighbors yesterday or the feeling of being watched. "Yep," Lisa said, flashing a big grin that didn't quite hide her own nervous energy. "I'm gonna make a ton of friends, right, Mom?" "Of course you are, baby," Nina replied, pulling her daughter into a hug. As she glanced over Lisa's shoulder, she saw her husband, Malcolm, emerge from the house carrying his travel mug and briefcase. He joined them with a smile, ruffling Lisa's hair gently. "All right, kiddo," he said, kneeling down to Lisa's height. "What did we talk about last night? Remember?" Lisa nodded seriously, biting her lip as she tried to recall their conversation. "Be myself, be kind, and if anything makes me uncomfortable, tell a teacher or you guys." "Exactly. That's my girl." Malcolm grinned, and Nina felt a surge of pride. They had raised their daughter to be strong and honest, and she believed Lisa would do just fine. She just needed the chance to settle in. The distant rumble of the school bus caught their attention, growing louder until the large yellow bus turned the corner and pulled up to the curb with a soft screech. The door hissed open, revealing the driver, a middle-aged man with graying hair and tired eyes. He wore an oversized jacket with the collar turned up against the morning chill, and his face held a kind of calm neutrality that Nina couldn't quite read. He looked down at them, his gaze lingering on Lisa for a split second longer than Nina liked. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep but friendly enough. "You must be new to the route." "Yes," Nina replied, giving him a polite smile, trying to dismiss her own reservations. "This is Lisa. She'll be riding with you." The driver gave a slow nod, his eyes fixed on Lisa. "Welcome aboard, Lisa. I'm Mr. Jones." His smile was thin, and there was something almost unreadable behind it. For a moment, Nina thought she caught a flash of something in his expression, something that sent a faint shiver down her spine. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a blank, polite look. "All right, kiddo. It's time," Malcolm said, giving Lisa an encouraging pat on the back. She turned and hesitated for just a second before climbing the steps. Mr. Jones gave her a slight nod as she passed, and Nina couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes lingered a beat too long on her little girl. As the bus pulled away, Nina stood on the curb, watching it disappear around the corner. Malcolm put a reassuring arm around her shoulders. "She'll be okay," he murmured, sensing her worry. "Lisa's tough, and it's a good school. We made the right choice moving here." I know," Nina replied, trying to shake off the feeling. "It's just I don't know, that bus driver." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Jones. He seemed fine, a bit reserved, maybe, but he's been driving kids around for years, I'm sure." "Yeah, I'm probably just being overprotective," Nina admitted, though the unease lingered. She forced herself to push the feeling aside as they walked back to the house. The day crawled by as Nina attempted to focus on setting up her new home office. Every so often, her mind wandered back to Lisa, picturing her shyly introducing herself to her new classmates, navigating a new school, and perhaps even feeling lonely. Nina kept glancing at the clock, counting down the hours until Lisa would be back. When the time finally came, she was waiting by the window, peeking through the blinds. Her heart skipped a beat as she heard the familiar rumble of the bus engine, followed by the soft squeal of brakes. She rushed to the door just as Lisa bounded down the bus steps, her backpack bouncing behind her. "Hi, Mom," Lisa called, her voice cheerful and bright. Nana felt a wave of relief wash over her as she opened her arms to her daughter. "Hey, sweetie, how was your first day?" Nana asked, wrapping Lisa in a warm hug. Lisa's eyes sparkled with excitement as she launched into her story, talking about the new girl she'd met at lunch and the fun games at recess. Nina listened intently, soaking in every word. It seemed like everything had gone well. But then, as they were walking up the driveway, Lisa suddenly paused. "Mom?" she asked, glancing up with a slight frown. "Yes, honey." Lisa hesitated, then shrugged. The bus driver was a little strange. Nina's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her tone casual. "Strange? How so?" Lisa looked away, fidgeting with the straps of her backpack. "I don't know. He just kept looking at me, and he made a weird comment, like, 'You're gonna be my favorite passenger.'" She shrugged again, dismissing it with a nervous laugh. "Maybe he's just trying to be friendly." Nina felt a chill crawl up her spine. She kept her voice steady, forcing herself not to show her concern. "Well, if anything makes you uncomfortable, you can always tell me, okay? I'm here to help." Lisa nodded, giving her mom a reassuring smile. "Okay, Mom, I will." That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Lisa continued to chat about her day, and Nina tried her best to push the nagging feeling aside. But later, as she tucked Lisa into bed, Nina couldn't help but think about the bus driver's comment. Was it harmless, or was there something darker beneath his grandfatherly demeanor? After Lisa drifted off to sleep, Nina joined Malcolm in their bedroom, sitting at the edge of the bed, lost in thought. Malcolm noticed her expression and placed a comforting hand on her back. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly. "It's just..." Nina hesitated, unsure if she was overreacting. Lisa mentioned something odd about the bus driver. He apparently said she would be his favorite passenger and kept staring at her. Malcolm's brow furrowed. "Maybe he's just trying to be nice. But if it's bothering you, maybe we should keep an eye on things. You know, make sure he's really as harmless as he seems." Nina nodded, feeling the sense of relief that she wasn't alone in her concerns. "I think that's a good idea. Maybe it's nothing, but I just want to be sure." They agreed to watch for any more signs, comforting each other with the thought that, for now, everything was probably fine. As they settled into bed, Nana found herself staring at the ceiling, the weight of her motherly instinct heavy in her chest. She tried to brush it off as overprotectiveness, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Outside, the stars shone brightly over their quiet suburban street, casting long shadows in the moonlight. The night was calm, but Nina's thoughts were anything but. She drifted off into an uneasy sleep, hoping that tomorrow would bring clarity and peace, not realizing that this was only the beginning of a journey far darker than she could have imagined. Silent changes. The next morning came with the same gentle light filtering through the windows, but a tension hung in the Johnson household that hadn't been there the day before. Nana watched Lisa eat her cereal, the spoon clinking against the bowl as she mindlessly stirred her breakfast. Normally, Lisa would chatter about her dreams or what she wanted to do at recess, but today she was unusually quiet. Nina exchanged a glance with Malcolm over their coffee cups, her brow furrowing as she studied her daughter's downcast face. When Lisa finally looked up, she caught her parents watching her and gave them a small, uncertain smile. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Nina asked gently. Lisa nodded quickly, a little too quickly, and put on a forced grin. "Yeah, Mom. Just nervous about school, I guess." Her voice trailed off, and she took another small spoonful of cereal. Nina decided not to press her, but the tension didn't leave her chest. After breakfast, Lisa picked up her backpack and followed her parents outside. They stood with her on the curb, waiting for the bus, the early morning air crisp and cool. Malcolm knelt down beside Lisa, giving her a gentle hug. "Remember what we talked about, okay? Just be yourself," he said, trying to encourage her. Lisa nodded, her smile returning a bit more genuinely, but her eyes kept darting toward the corner, watching for the bus. She seemed more anxious than she had yesterday, fidgeting with the straps of her backpack, shifting her weight from foot to foot. Nina's hand found Malcolm's as they both watched her closely. When the familiar rumble of the yellow bus echoed down the street, Lisa's grip on her backpack tightened, and she took a small step back, as if instinctively retreating. The bus pulled up to the curb with a mechanical hiss, and Mr. Jones, the gray-haired bus driver, leaned over to open the door. He gave the family a polite nod, his face still unreadable. "Morning, Lisa," he greeted, his voice smooth and calm, though his eyes lingered on her as she climbed the steps. "Good morning," Lisa mumbled, barely meeting his gaze as she stepped onto the bus. Nina watched as Lisa took her seat near the front, her small face pressed against the window as the bus rolled away. Just before it turned the corner, Nina caught sight of Mr. Jones glancing back in the rearview mirror, his eyes flicking toward Lisa in a way that made Nina's stomach twist. The day seemed to drag on for Nina. She tried to focus on setting up her home office, unpacking boxes and arranging her workspace, but her thoughts kept returning to Lisa. She couldn't shake the image of Mr. Jones's lingering glance in the mirror, the way Lisa had shifted nervously as the bus approached. By lunchtime, she found herself pacing by the window, checking her watch, counting down the hours until the school day would end. Finally, the familiar rumble of the bus signaled Lisa's return. Nina hurried to the door just as the bus pulled up to the curb. Lisa stepped off slowly, her expression distant. She barely lifted her gaze as she walked up the driveway, her feet dragging. "Hey, sweetie," Nina called, kneeling to give Lisa a hug. "How was your day?" Lisa shrugged, a slight frown creasing her forehead. "It was okay, I guess." Nina took her daughter's hand, leading her inside. "Did anything interesting happen? Did you make any new friends?" Lisa hesitated, glancing away before replying. "Not really. I just sat by myself today." Nina's heart sank. She had hoped the move would give Lisa a fresh start, but hearing that her daughter felt lonely tugged at her. "I'm sorry, honey. It takes time to make friends. I'm sure the other kids will warm up to you soon," she said, squeezing Lisa's hand. "Did you have any trouble on the bus?" Lisa paused for a moment, her eyes darting away. "No," she replied softly, a faint blush creeping up her cheeks. "Nothing happened. It's fine." But her words lacked conviction, and Nina could sense something unsaid lingering between them. She didn't want to push Lisa, but every instinct she had told her that something was off. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Malcolm tried to engage Lisa in conversation about her day. He asked about her teachers, the classroom, what subjects she'd studied, and Lisa answered in short, clipped responses. Her usual energy seemed dimmed, her once bright enthusiasm dull to a mere flicker. At one point, while they were clearing the table, Nina noticed a small bruise forming on Lisa's wrist, barely visible under her sweater sleeve. Concern flared up in her, and she gently took Lisa's arm to get a closer look. "Honey, what happened here?" she asked softly, her thumb grazing over the faint purple mark. Lisa quickly pulled her arm back, tucking it behind her as she forced a laugh. "Oh, it's nothing. I just bumped into the seat on the bus." Nina exchanged a worried look with Malcolm, who gave a small nod. They decided to let it go for now, but the nagging feeling in Nina's chest grew stronger. Later that night, after Lisa had gone to bed, Nina and Malcolm sat together in the living room, both lost in their own thoughts. "I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong," Nina admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's not herself, Malcolm. She's quieter, and she didn't even want to talk about her day." "That's not like her." Malcolm sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Maybe it's just the adjustment period. New school, new neighborhood. It can be a lot for a kid to handle." "But what about that bruise? And the way she talked about the bus driver this morning?" Nina pressed. I don't want to overreact, but something doesn't feel right. Malcolm looked at her, his face troubled. Maybe you're right. We should keep an eye on it, at least for a little while. If it's nothing, we'll have peace of mind. But if it's something more. They both fell silent, the weight of their concerns heavy in the room. Malcolm eventually wrapped an arm around Nina, pulling her close. Let's just be patient, okay? We'll watch for any changes, and if anything seems off, we'll talk to Lisa. We're here for her. Nina nodded, though the sense of unease still twisted in her stomach. She couldn't shake the image of Mr. Jones's eyes lingering on her daughter, the bruise on Lisa's wrist, the silence that now filled their home where laughter once echoed. Over the next few days, the tension only seemed to grow. Lisa became more withdrawn, her cheerful spirit dimming even further. Each morning, she hesitated a bit longer before boarding the bus, her steps reluctant and her head down. She no longer waved goodbye to her parents, but instead offered a small, tight smile that never reached her eyes. One evening, while brushing Lisa's hair before bed, Nina tried gently bringing up the topic. Sweetie, are you sure everything's okay on the bus? If something's bothering you, you know you can tell me, right? Lisa stiffened, her hands curling into fists on her lap. Mom, please. It's nothing. Can we just not talk about it? The deflection only deepened Nina's worry, but she nodded, respecting Lisa's boundaries. That night, Nana lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with a mixture of worry and dread. What was it about that bus, about Mr. Jones, that made her daughter so tense? The next morning, Nina was waiting at the curb as the bus pulled up, her gaze fixed on Mr. Jones as Lisa climbed aboard. This time, Nina noticed the slight hesitation in Lisa's step, the way her shoulders tensed as she moved past the driver. Mr. Jones's face remained impassive, his eyes cool and unreadable. But as the bus pulled away, Nina thought she saw a flicker of something in his expression, a hint of satisfaction, almost smug, as he glanced back in the rearview mirror. Her heart hammered in her chest as she watched the bus disappear around the corner. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong. And if Lisa wouldn't open up to her, then she would have to find answers another way. Nina made a promise to herself that she would find out what was going on, even if it meant taking matters into her own hands. A mother's intuition. Days turned into a tense routine for Nina. Each morning, she watched Lisa board the bus with a heavy heart, hoping for any sign that her daughter felt comfortable again. But each day, Lisa seemed quieter, more withdrawn. She still responded when asked about school, but her answers were clipped, lacking any of the bubbly details she once shared so freely. Nana couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something was seriously wrong. One morning, just as the bus rounded the corner and disappeared from sight, Nina made a decision. She wasn't going to wait any longer. She had to know what was happening on that bus. And if Mr. Jones was doing anything to make Lisa uneasy, she would find out. She wasn't exactly sure how, but Nina knew she would do whatever it took to protect her daughter. After making sure Malcolm had already left for work and she was alone in the house, she picked up her phone and dialed the school's front office. She quickly explained who she was and asked to speak to the principal, Mr. Hammond. When the principal's voice came on the line, calm and professional, Nina explained her concerns, choosing her words carefully to avoid sounding accusatory. Mr. Hammond, I wanted to reach out because I've noticed some changes in my daughter, Lisa. Nina began, her tone polite but firm. She seems anxious lately, especially around the bus driver. I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but I just wanted to know if there have been any issues with Mr. Jones in the past. There was a pause on the other end before Mr. Hammond responded, his voice carefully measured. Mrs. Johnson, we haven't had any complaints about Mr. Jones. He's been with the school district for over 20 years, and he's generally well regarded. That said, I understand your concern as a parent. If you'd like, we can arrange for Lisa to sit closer to the front, or even try to talk to her about it. Nina felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She knew Mr. Hammond was trying to be helpful, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was being brushed aside. Still, she managed to keep her voice steady. "I appreciate that, Mr. Hammond. I'll speak to Lisa, but please, if anything comes up, anything at all, would you let me know?" "Of course, Mrs. Johnson," he replied reassuringly. After hanging up, Nina felt no closer to understanding what was going on, but she resolved to keep a closer eye on things. That evening, as Lisa worked on her homework, Nina decided to try a different approach. She made Lisa's favorite after-school snack, apple slices with peanut butter and honey, and brought it over, sitting down beside her. "So tell me about school," she began, keeping her tone light and casual. "Any new friends?" Lisa shrugged, not looking up from her worksheet. "It's fine, Mom. Just the usual stuff." Nina bit her lip, unsure of how to proceed. "And what about the bus ride? Are you getting along okay with Mr. Jones?" Lisa's hand paused mid-sentence, and for a moment, she seemed frozen in place. Then she quickly resumed her writing, her voice barely a whisper. "It's fine. I sit near the front now." Nina felt a pang of worry, but didn't push her. The next morning, however, she decided to watch the bus ride herself. She dressed quickly, grabbed her car keys, and parked her car at a spot further down the bus route, waiting. When the bus finally came into view, she spotted Lisa sitting in one of the front seats, her small face turned toward the window, lost in thought. She didn't look around, didn't engage with anyone, just stared out blankly. As Mr. Jones drove, Nina noticed that he kept glancing into the rearview mirror, his eyes flicking to Lisa every so often. Nina's grip on the steering wheel tightened as she watched his face, her mind racing with questions. She followed the bus all the way to the school, making sure Lisa got off safely, and went inside. But the sense of unease only grew stronger. That evening after dinner, Nina decided to take another approach. She brought up a conversation with Malcolm after they'd tucked Lisa into bed. "I can't ignore it anymore," she said quietly, folding her arms as she leaned against the counter. "Lisa's not herself. She's quieter. And that bruise. I don't think it's from bumping into a seat, Malcolm. I think something else is going on, and I'm worried." Malcolm looked at her thoughtfully, his face lined with concern. "What are you thinking, Nina?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I feel like Mr. Jones. I just don't trust him. I watched him today. He kept looking at Lisa through the mirror. It felt wrong." Malcolm sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right. So what do we do? We don't want to jump to conclusions, but we can't ignore this either." Nina paused, considering her next words carefully. "I think we need to talk to Lisa, really talk to her. I don't want to scare her, but she needs to know she can tell us anything." The following evening, they decided it was time. After a quiet dinner, they sat down with Lisa in the living room, turning off the TV and setting their phones aside. "Lisa," Nina began gently, reaching over to hold her daughter's hand. "Your dad and I want to talk to you about something important. We've noticed you seem a little sad lately, and we want to make sure you're okay." Lisa looked down, her small hand trembling slightly in her mother's grasp. "I'm fine, Mom," she whispered, but her voice sounded hollow, unconvincing. "Sweetheart," Malcolm said, his voice soft and comforting. "If there's something bothering you, anything at all, you can tell us. You don't have to be scared. We're here to help you, no matter what." There was a long silence as Lisa stared at her lap, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Jones, he makes me feel weird," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. Nina's heart clenched. "What do you mean, honey?" Lisa bit her lip, her eyes filling with unshed tears. He says strange things sometimes, like that I'm his favorite, and that he's glad he gets to see me every day. He touched my shoulder the other day, but it felt wrong, Mom. It didn't feel like when you or Dad hugged me." Nina felt a surge of protectiveness flood her. Mingling with anger, she struggled to keep under control. She exchanged a glance with Malcolm, who nodded subtly, indicating his agreement to handle this carefully. "Lisa," Malcolm said, his tone gentle but firm, "thank you for telling us. We're going to make sure you're safe, okay? You won't have to feel uncomfortable around Mr. Jones anymore." Tears streamed down Lisa's cheeks as she nodded, relief and fear mingling in her expression. Nina hugged her tightly, holding her daughter close, feeling a mixture of rage and determination solidify within her. Mr. Jones would not continue to make her daughter feel unsafe. She would ensure that Lisa could ride to school without fear. After Lisa had gone to bed, Nina and Malcolm stayed up late, discussing their options. They decided they would speak with the school's principal again the following day, this time with the full story. Nina couldn't bear the thought of her daughter enduring another day with Mr. Jones driving that bus. It was clear that more action was needed, and they were prepared to protect their daughter by any means necessary. The night passed slowly, Nina barely sleeping as she lay awake, her thoughts racing. She had always known she would do anything for Lisa, but this was different. She was prepared to fight to protect her. And nothing, no reputation, no complacency, would stand in her way. A startling discovery. The following morning, Nina was determined. She drove Lisa to school herself, refusing to let her step foot on the bus, and called the principal's office the moment she got home. Her voice was calm but resolute as she asked to meet with Mr. Hammond. He agreed to see her later that day. In the school's office, Nina sat across from Mr. Hammond, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, before recounting what Lisa had told her the night before. Mr. Hammond listened, his expression growing increasingly serious, though a hint of disbelief flickered in his eyes. "Mrs. Johnson," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I assure you, Mr. Jones has been driving for our district for over 2 decades. He's built a reputation as a trusted, respected employee." "I understand that, Mr. Hammond," Nina replied, her tone unwavering, "but my daughter's discomfort is real. I'm not accusing anyone without evidence, but I can't ignore Lisa's fears. Something has made her feel unsafe, and as her mother, I have to take that seriously." Mr. Hammond sighed, clearly torn between upholding the district's reputation and addressing Nina's concerns. "We'll look into it, Mrs. Johnson," he said at last. "I'll speak to Mr. Jones personally and let him know of your concerns. In the meantime, if it would make you more comfortable, you're welcome to bring Lisa to school yourself." "Thank you," Nina said, though she felt less than satisfied. She could tell that Mr. Hammond was reluctant to take serious action, but she knew that was all she'd get from him for now. Over the next few days, Nina drove Lisa to and from school herself, keeping her close and monitoring her mood. Gradually, Lisa began to relax, the brightness returning to her eyes as she told her mom about her new friends and the art project her teacher had assigned. But just as Nina was beginning to feel a sense of relief, a knock at the door one evening shattered her calm. Malcolm answered the door, and standing there was one of their neighbors, Mrs. Ellsworth, a kind but chatty woman in her 60s. She looked uneasy, clutching her purse tightly, as if wrestling with whether she should have come over at all. "Hi, Malcolm," she said, glancing over his shoulder at Nina. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I thought, well, maybe you should know." "Know what?" Malcolm asked, frowning. Mrs. Ellsworth glanced around, as if worried someone might overhear. "I volunteer with the district's transportation office. Just this morning, I overheard some talk about Mr. Jones. I thought it was just rumors, but—" Nina and Malcolm exchanged a look, the unease rising in both of them. "Please, come in," Nina urged, guiding Mrs. Ellsworth to a chair in the living room. "What did you hear?" Mrs. Ellsworth shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between them. Apparently, there were some complaints from other parents a few years back. About Mr. Jones, nothing was ever proven, and the parents eventually stopped pressing the issue. "But I thought you should know. They said He had a habit of making certain kids uncomfortable. Like he was too friendly, if you understand. Nina's blood ran cold. So there had been previous concerns about Mr. Jones, and yet the district had kept him on. She struggled to keep her voice steady as she thanked Mrs. Ellsworth for the information. That night, after Mrs. Ellsworth had left, Nina and Malcolm sat in their living room, grappling with their next steps. The new information confirmed Nina's fears, but it also complicated things. They had no concrete proof, no visible harm, just the lingering discomfort of their daughter, and now a troubling rumor. "We need to do something," Nina said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't let him keep driving kids, Malcolm. Not if there's any chance he's making them feel unsafe." Malcolm nodded, his jaw tight. "Agreed. But we'll need to be smart about this. We can't just confront him, not without evidence. But maybe we can gather more information. Other parents, perhaps." The next day, Nina reached out to a few mothers she had met at Lisa's school, carefully broaching the subject without causing alarm. At first, the conversations were polite but brief. Most of the parents seemed to regard Mr. Jones as a harmless, long-standing driver, a figure they'd grown to trust. But when Nina mentioned her concerns, one mother, Mrs. Perez, paused, her expression turning thoughtful. "I don't want to jump to conclusions, but Mrs. Perez's voice grew quiet as she glanced around. "My son, Daniel, told me once that Mr. Jones made him feel strange. He didn't say much, just that Mr. Jones liked to pat his shoulder a lot and would sometimes ask about things that seemed personal. I thought it was odd, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it at the time." As Nina continued talking to more parents, similar stories emerged, small instances that might have seemed harmless on their own, but together painted a troubling picture. She heard accounts of Mr. Jones making lingering comments about students, of subtle touches on shoulders or hair that made the children uncomfortable. Each story, on its own, had been easy to overlook, but together they revealed a disturbing pattern that sent chills down Nina's spine. Armed with these testimonies, Nina returned to Mr. Hammond's office, this time accompanied by Malcolm. She laid out everything she had heard, her voice calm but firm as she presented her case. Mr. Hammond listened, his face growing paler with each new story. When she finished, he took a deep breath, leaning back in his chair as he ran a hand over his face. "This is troubling," he admitted, glancing from Nina to Malcolm. "I didn't realize there were so many concerns. I'll speak to the superintendent and recommend a review of Mr. Jones's conduct. We can't take any risks with our students' safety." As they left the school, Nina felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She had done everything she could to protect Lisa and her classmates, but she knew that administrative wheels could turn slowly. She hoped that her efforts would be enough to keep Mr. Jones from causing any more harm. However, the following morning brought an unexpected shock. Nina's phone buzzed just as she was getting Lisa ready for school. She picked it up, frowning at the unknown number. "Hello, Nina Johnson." The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, official sounding. "Yes, this is she. This is Officer Richards with the local police department. We'd like to ask you some questions regarding recent complaints made to the school about Mr. Thomas Jones. Are you available to come down to the station?" Nina felt her heart skip a beat. "Of course," she replied, glancing at Malcolm, who had overheard and was now watching her with concern. "Is something wrong?" "It's just a preliminary investigation, Mom," the officer replied, his tone measured. "But given the nature of the complaints, we take any potential misconduct involving minors very seriously." After arranging for a neighbor to watch Lisa, Nina and Malcolm made their way to the police station. Inside, they were led to a small room where Officer Richards met them with a stack of files and a serious expression. "Thank you for coming in," he began, gesturing for them to sit. "We're aware of the complaints you brought to the school's attention. What you may not know is that Mr. Jones was previously investigated several years ago, though no charges were filed due to lack of evidence. We have records of similar complaints from other parents over the years. Nina's mind reeled. She had suspected there was more to the story, but hearing it confirmed felt like a punch to the gut. So, why was he still driving children if there were previous complaints? She asked, barely keeping the tremor out of her voice. Officer Richards sighed. Unfortunately, without concrete evidence or a direct accusation from a child, it's difficult to take action. But given the recent complaints, we're considering reopening the investigation. If you can provide any details about your daughter's experience, it would be helpful. Nina told the officer everything Lisa had shared, every uneasy feeling, every strange look, every odd comment. As she spoke, her voice filled with the fierce protectiveness of a mother determined to shield her child. Malcolm added his perspective, emphasizing how deeply Lisa's behavior had changed since riding with Mr. Jones. When they finished, Officer Richards nodded, his expression grave. "Thank you. We'll be following up with other families to build a case, and in the meantime, we'll ensure that Mr. Jones is placed on administrative leave while we investigate." Nina felt a flood of relief mixed with the lingering tension of uncertainty. She and Malcolm left the station knowing that, while there were no guarantees, they had taken the first steps in protecting not only Lisa, but every other child on that bus. As they drove home, Nina held Malcolm's hand tightly, both of them resolute. They had no intention of letting this go. The unraveling. The days that followed were tense for Nina and Malcolm. Each morning, Nina still drove Lisa to school, and each evening, she waited to hear back from Officer Richards, hoping for any sign of progress. Every interaction they had with the school felt heavy, burdened by an underlying sense of suspicion and uncertainty that permeated the air. Mr. Jones had been placed on administrative leave, but there were still whispers among parents and staff, some who seemed sympathetic, others who viewed the Johnsons' actions with skepticism or outright disapproval. On the third day after their visit to the station, Officer Richards called. His tone was brisk and cautious, hinting at something serious. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "I have some updates regarding Mr. Jones's case. We've gathered additional testimonies from other parents and students, and we're in the process of reviewing security footage from school property where the bus stops. I believe you'll be interested in what we've uncovered so far." A tense silence followed. Nina could feel her pulse quicken, and she clutched the phone tightly. "What did you find, officer?" "I can't reveal all details yet," he replied, his tone measured. "But we've come across multiple corroborating statements from students who described feeling uncomfortable or being touched in ways that, while not overtly inappropriate, crossed boundaries. One child described Mr. Jones's behavior as too friendly, saying that he would sometimes offer candy or comment on their appearance. And we discovered something else." Malcolm, who had been listening closely, leaned forward, his face etched with worry. "What is it?" Officer Richards paused, choosing his words carefully. "One of the bus cameras, set up for security and positioned to capture the front of the bus, recorded Mr. Jones making subtle but unusual gestures toward children as they boarded. In one case, he appears to lean in too close, brushing his hand against a student's shoulder as she passed. We're reviewing these moments frame by frame to ensure we fully understand what's happening. But it's clear there's a pattern of behavior." Nina's stomach twisted, both with anger and with a sickening sense of confirmation. She had hoped, in a way, that her fears were exaggerated, that perhaps she'd misread Lisa's anxiety. But hearing that there was recorded evidence, visual proof that something was wrong, struck her deeply. "Officer, what happens now?" Nina managed, her voice tight. "We're working on gathering as much evidence as possible, Mrs. Johnson," he replied. "But I can assure you that Mr. Jones won't be returning to drive the school bus anytime soon. I'd suggest keeping your daughter off the bus route for now. We're committed to making sure every child feels safe." When she hung up, Nina felt a mix of relief and anger. She and Malcolm sat together in silence for a moment, both processing the weight of the news. "It wasn't just Lisa," Nina whispered, her hands trembling slightly. "It was other kids too. And that footage. Malcolm. He was doing this for who knows how long. How many children felt that discomfort and never said a word? Malcolm nodded grimly, his face dark with anger. I feel guilty, he said, clenching his fists. We were hesitant. We questioned ourselves. But Lisa, she was telling us the truth all along, and we should have trusted her sooner. Hey, Nina said softly, reaching over to take his hand. We did the best we could. And now, because of us, because of Lisa, this is finally being exposed. Maybe we couldn't prevent it from happening, but we can make sure it never happens again. They were both silent, allowing the words to sink in. Though they had uncovered the truth, a part of them felt the weight of responsibility for not acting sooner. But Nina knew they had done what mattered most. They had believed their daughter. The following day, Nina went to pick Lisa up from school as usual, but instead of their typical routine, she decided to take her out for a treat. They went to a nearby cafe where Lisa's favorite chocolate milkshake was served in tall, frosty glasses with whipped cream and sprinkles. As they sat by the window, Lisa seemed to sense that this wasn't just any after-school outing. Mom, is everything okay? She asked quietly, stirring her milkshake with her straw. Nina looked at her daughter, taking in the innocence of her wide eyes, the way she still held a hint of fear in her expression. She reached over and gently placed her hand on Lisa's. Lisa, I need you to know something important, she began, her voice soft but steady. Your dad and I talked to the school and the police about Mr. Jones. You were brave for telling us the truth, and because of that, they're looking into what he's been doing. Lisa's eyes widened, and she looked down, her face a mix of relief and nervousness. Am I in trouble? Nina's heart broke a little, and she squeezed her daughter's hand. Oh, honey, no, not at all. You did exactly the right thing. You were so brave to tell us, and because of that, we're making sure that no one else has to feel uncomfortable like you did. You helped other kids too. Lisa's face softened, and she gave a small nod, as if the weight on her shoulders had finally begun to lift. Thank you, Mom, she whispered. I didn't like the way he looked at me. I was scared you wouldn't believe me. Nina fought back tears, leaning over to pull her daughter into a tight hug. Lisa, I will always believe you, no matter what, okay? You can always tell me anything. They sat in silence for a while, Lisa sipping her milkshake, a tiny smile beginning to form as she let the relief wash over her. In the days that followed, news of the investigation into Mr. Jones spread quickly. Whispers filled the school's hallways, and rumors circulated among parents and teachers alike. Some parents were shocked, horrified that they had trusted their children's safety to a man who harbored such disturbing tendencies. Others refused to believe it, holding on to the idea that Mr. Jones, with his years of experience, was simply being misunderstood. At a PTA meeting the following week, the topic of Mr. Jones dominated the conversation. Several parents, emboldened by the investigation, shared stories of their own children's discomfort, their voices filled with a mixture of anger and regret. Nina spoke as well, her voice calm but firm, recounting how her daughter had felt fearful and how she and Malcolm had struggled to uncover the truth. This isn't about pointing fingers, Nina said, looking out at the gathered parents. This is about making sure our children are safe, that they can go to school without fear. I know many of us trusted Mr. Jones, but we have to put our kids first. They're the ones who deserve our loyalty and protection. As the meeting ended, several parents approached her, some offering apologies for not speaking up sooner, others simply thanking her for her courage. For the first time in weeks, Nina felt a sense of peace, knowing that her efforts to protect Lisa were not in vain. Weeks later, Officer Richards called with the final update. Mr. Jones had resigned under pressure, and although there wasn't enough evidence to press formal charges, his conduct had been thoroughly documented, and he would no longer be allowed to work in the school district. The case, while unofficially closed, had made waves. Several other parents filed formal complaints, and the district implemented new protocols to ensure drivers were properly vetted and monitored. As Nina listened to the officer, she felt a mixture of satisfaction and lingering sadness. While they hadn't been able to bring full justice, she knew they had done enough to stop Mr. Jones from hurting anyone else. After hanging up, she found Lisa playing with her toys in the living room, her laughter filling the house with a warmth that Nina hadn't heard in what felt like months. She joined her daughter on the floor, watching as Lisa arranged her dolls, each one carefully positioned in a circle, as if they were gathered in a meeting of their own. "Mom," Lisa said suddenly, looking up, "can I ride the bus again someday? When there's a different driver?" Nina smiled, her heart swelling with pride for her daughter's bravery. "Yes, honey. Someday, when you're ready. And when that day comes, I'll be right there to watch you get on, just like I always have." Lisa beamed, nodding as if this small reassurance was all she needed. For the first time in a long time, Nina felt the weight lift, the feeling of peace and security slowly settling back into their lives. As she watched her daughter play, Nina knew that, despite the challenges, they had come out stronger. Their family, tested and tried, had prevailed, bound by trust and courage. In the end, they had done what mattered most. They had protected each other. A new chapter. A few weeks had passed since Mr. Jones's resignation, but the aftershocks of the experience lingered in the Johnson household. Although the immediate threat was gone, Nana knew it would take time for her family to feel fully safe and whole again. Lisa, though relieved, was still cautious around strangers, and no longer the carefree girl who had eagerly anticipated her first day at the new school. She now asked questions she never had before. "Is that person safe, Mom?" Or, "Why was that person looking at me?" One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Malcolm gently broached the topic. "How would everyone feel about taking a little trip?" he asked, his voice filled with hope. Lisa perked up, her eyes widening in excitement. "Like a vacation." "Exactly," he replied, smiling. "I think we could all use a break, maybe a few days away to reset. What do you think, Lisa?" Lisa looked to her mom for confirmation, a hopeful gleam in her eye. Nana met Malcolm's gaze, and after a moment's consideration, she nodded. "I think it sounds perfect," she said, feeling a sense of relief at the thought of escaping, even just for a while. They decided on a beach trip, a 3-hour drive from their home. The ocean had always been a source of calm for the family, and they hoped it would help Lisa and themselves reclaim some of the joy that had been lost over the past few months. Early the next Saturday, they packed the car with beach towels, umbrellas, and a cooler full of snacks, and set off. As they drove, Nana glanced into the rearview mirror, watching Lisa gaze out the window with a small, dreamy smile on her face. The salty breeze swept in through the windows as they neared the coast, carrying the smell of the ocean. The atmosphere in the car was light, and for the first time in weeks, Nina felt as though her family was breathing again, letting go of the weight they had been carrying. Once they reached the beach, they set up their spot near the water's edge, and Lisa wasted no time in kicking off her shoes and running barefoot across the sand. Malcolm jogged after her, laughing as they splashed each other with the cool ocean water. Nana watched them with a heart full of gratitude, feeling the tension in her shoulders release as the waves crashed rhythmically in the background. The sound of Lisa's laughter, pure and unburdened, filled her ears like music. As the day went on, they built sandcastles, collected seashells, and enjoyed each other's company with an ease that felt like a gift. By evening, Lisa was exhausted, her hair sticky with salt and her cheeks flushed from the sun. As they sat together on a beach blanket, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Lisa leaned her head on Nana's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "Mom, I'm really happy we came here," she whispered. "I don't feel scared here." Nina wrapped an arm around her daughter, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "That's all I wanted, sweetie. I wanted you to feel safe and happy again." Lisa looked up at her mom, her eyes filled with a seriousness that surprised Nina. "I don't think I'll ever forget Mr. Jones," she admitted, "but I don't feel as scared about it now. And I know you and Dad will always protect me." Nina felt a swell of pride and sadness all at once. Lisa had been through an experience no child should face, yet she had come out stronger, her resilience shining through. It was a bittersweet reminder of how much Lisa had grown, not by choice but by necessity. When they returned home, Lisa's confidence continued to grow. She began walking into school on her own, chatting freely with her classmates, and even joined the after-school art club. Each new step felt like a victory to Nina, a sign that her daughter was healing, that she was reclaiming the parts of her childhood that had been threatened. One evening, as Nina prepared dinner, she heard Lisa chatting with her friend on the phone in the other room. She smiled to herself, savoring the sound of her daughter's animated voice, the way it filled their home with a warmth that had been absent for too long. That night, after they had eaten and Malcolm was helping Lisa with her homework, there was a knock at the door. Nina opened it to find Mrs. Ellsworth, the neighbor who had initially confided in them about Mr. Jones. She looked hesitant, holding a small basket of cookies wrapped in cellophane. "I just wanted to stop by and see how you all were doing," she said, offering the cookies with a gentle smile. "And to say thank you for what you did. I know it couldn't have been easy." Nina accepted the cookies and invited her inside. They sat together in the living room, and Mrs. Ellsworth shared stories of how her own children, now grown, had once ridden the same school bus. She admitted that she'd always thought of Mr. Jones as harmless, the quiet, grandfatherly type, and she'd been shocked to learn of the investigation's findings. "It's hard to face the truth sometimes," she said softly, her eyes downcast. "But it was necessary. Your bravery helped protect the children in our community. And well, I think you should know that other parents have spoken to the school board about implementing stronger background checks and more supervision for the drivers." Nina felt a surge of relief, knowing that their actions had not only brought about accountability, but also positive change. "Thank you, Mrs. Ellsworth. That means a lot to us," she said, grateful for the neighbors' support. After she left, Nina joined Malcolm and Lisa at the kitchen table, helping them finish up homework. She realized that, despite the darkness they had endured, they had emerged with new strength. They had made a difference, not just for Lisa, but for all the children who would follow. In the months that followed, the school district introduced additional measures to ensure the safety of its students. They installed security cameras on every bus and implemented more frequent background checks on their drivers. The administration even held a meeting with the parents, reassuring them of the changes and inviting feedback to maintain an open line of communication. Parents thanked the Johnsons for their courage in speaking up, and some even shared stories of their own struggles, creating a newfound sense of community within the neighborhood. Lisa's teachers noted a change in her as well. She had grown more confident, often taking on leadership roles in group projects, and her artistic talents blossomed in the after-school art club. She even won a small art contest, and her painting was displayed in the school hallway. Each time Nina passed it during school events, she felt a swell of pride, seeing her daughter's work celebrated as a testament to her resilience. One afternoon, as they were walking home from school, Lisa looked up at her mom with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, remember when you said I was brave for telling you about Mr. Jones?" "Yes, I do," Nina replied, looking down at her daughter with a smile. "Because you were incredibly brave, Lisa." Lisa smiled shyly, glancing away. "Well, I'm glad I told you. And I think, maybe when I grow up, I want to help people too. Like you and Dad helped me. Maybe I can be someone kids trust." Nina's heart swelled with pride, and she placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "I know you will, Lisa. You'll be someone who makes a difference in people's lives, just like you already have." As the years passed, Lisa's experience became a chapter in her life, a story she carried with her, but did not allow to define her. She grew into a thoughtful and compassionate young woman, her resilience shaping her into someone wise beyond her years. The Johnson family had emerged from their ordeal closer than ever, bound by trust, love, and the knowledge that they had stood together in the face of adversity. Years later, when Lisa was in high school, she took a public speaking class and chose to share her story in an essay assignment. She recounted the experience with honesty, describing the fear she had felt and the strength her parents had shown in standing up for her. Her teacher, moved by the story, invited Lisa to speak at an assembly about trust, courage, and the importance of telling someone when something feels wrong. Standing on that stage, Lisa felt nervous but empowered, her voice strong as she shared her story, hoping to inspire others to speak up, just as she once had. In the audience, Nina and Malcolm watched their daughter with tears in their eyes, filled with pride at the young woman she had become. They had navigated the darkest of storms together, and now, standing in the light of Lisa's resilience, they knew they had given her something priceless: the strength to stand up, to protect herself, and to carry her courage forward into the world. And as Lisa finished her speech, her words echoing through the auditorium, Nina knew that their family's journey had not only healed them, but had helped to create a community that valued trust, safety, and courage, a legacy that would carry on for generations to come.